Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the March 30 JupyterLab weekly call. If you haven't been here before, looks like we have 20 people, so maybe you all have, but just in case, in the chat, I pasted the meeting minutes. Please add your name to the attendees if you would like. And also, if there's something you'd like to talk about for roughly 5 minutes or so, add a bullet point to the agenda. And if there's something that might take a bit longer, add a bullet point to the additional discussion section at the bottom. And as always, at the end of the call, there will be some time to talk about things without recording. So I'll give a few minutes for that. But for now, let us get started. So first person on the agenda is Frederic.
Hey, everybody. So first, I just want to congratulate again Jason W. for keeping the housekeeping about the issue needing triage. There are only 8 listed, so that's great. And
although
then,
there were 7 an hour ago, so it's rising rapidly.
And then, yeah, I have lots of things, but mainly is to mentions. The main question I get is the one for 3.4.0. So last week we decided that we are gonna do a 3.4.0. The question is which features, what's the target date for it? I think there is here 2 paths. We can decide either we go for a quick release and just take what's available and do the release like in a month or something like that, or we try to be more ambitious on the list of features and then pick a later date. I don't have strong opinion for neither of those. And if you want, I can display and share the current list of PR. So this is the list. Don't hesitate to comment or edit directly the list if you have the right.
It looks like there's a lot of still open PRs. How close are those to being merged? Could we just say when these are all merged, we start the release process, or could some of these take forever, to put it bluntly?
So thanks for the comment. That brings me to another point, is that we need people to do review. I mean, lots of those that are open are mine or close to be closed because I've reviewed them.
Good to know. I can probably step up and do some reviews today and tomorrow.
Yeah, Frederic himself has given feedback on the topmost one, 12028, the cell toolbar, which I would say is close to being done. There's still some additional changes I need to make to address all of his stuff, but I'm optimistic that I can get it into like a releasable state by the end of this week.
And for the others, they are almost done. I mean, this one for the terminal in the launcher, it was waiting for a release of Jupyter server, and it's done, so it should be okay. I reviewed the one of Eric of Rexing the virtual notebook, and it should be good to go. There is still one thing that needs to be looked for, but I think it should be easy to figure out, hopefully. That one is ready. The one from Marta is ready. I think we have both approved it, Mike and me. I just waited. I'm waiting a couple of days before in case somebody wants to say something. And I reviewed the latest one that's from Eric too. It looks fine. Maybe like Isabella may have a say about the design. So the idea of this one is to have a link to jump directly to the preferred directory. And so the PR by Eric is to propose having a button instead of just a display / next to the folder icon. But otherwise the feature is there and the PR is good. So yeah, the question is mainly, are we trying to target something close or not? I like the proposal of Alex to say, okay, let's try to say we freeze that list and or maybe wait for the end of this week for to make the final list and then say, okay, when that list is finished, we do the release.
I like the idea of that, picking a freeze date for the list and then just releasing when the list is done. Are people comfortable with Friday being the freeze date for that? Do we want to make it this meeting next week? I'm good with either. I don't have anything. I don't have any skin in the game. The ones I have skin in the game are already merged.
I'd say let's set a goal of doing that on Friday, and let's check back in a week from now to keep ourselves honest.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Can I also check? I heard I was mentioned, but I wasn't sure if you're talking about one of Martha's PRs or Eric Charles's or both. Can I check which one you want me to follow up on?
It's probably more the one of Eric.
Thank you.
Cool. Is that it?
So yeah, so I already mentioned that a couple of PRs are in need of review. 2 of them are listed above and are waiting for review for like 3 weeks now. So it would be nice if somebody can have a look at that. I get a question too, is about icons. In recent PRs, some people have added icons in extension, like JSON, he added icons in the cell toolbar extension. Eric has added some in the file browser for his PR. And I don't know if there is a rules to say, should they be in extension or should they be in the UI component package? Like
I actually moved mine. Oh, sorry. I moved mine into the UI components package based on your feedback, but I don't know if there is a official standard for that.
Yeah, I don't think we said an official standard, but when we first created lab icons, I believe the intention was to store all the files in UI components for core. So any icons in core should theoretically be in UI components.
That was my feeling too. So,
but yeah, that was never discussed. That was more of just agreed upon during review of the addition of lab icons.
This would be a good thing to add to the documents then for prospective extension developers.
Well, 2 things. One is it would be good to add to the core JupyterLab docs for the contributing section, but not for extension authoring docs, because we're not talking about external extensions. But the question I was going to ask is, it's immaterial to whether it's in one package or another, whether it respects theming, right? Or is that actually one of the rationales for having all of them in one place?
As far as I understand, having them all in one place is solely for import reasons.
Yeah, theming is more a matter of using the proper classes. Like if you apply the appropriate classes to path elements, which is something I had to do manually, then when you switch to dark themes, you will have higher contrast icons. I forget where I saw that in the documents or who pointed it out, but it's been very useful.
Yeah, Max did a really good job of documenting how to do that when he wrote all of it. So, but yeah, the putting them all in one place is very much just for imports, because a lot of those icons are used by external extensions, and being able to import them all from UI components in the external extensions is important.
Okay, then I will open an issue to add a note on the documentation. And
yeah, cool. I think that's a compelling reason to ship them that way, because then it gives other extension authors the ability to write extensions that use the same UI language, and I think that's really good. Cool. Frederic, anything else?
Just to mention, there's been a report like for a couple of weeks or even months of some async queue bug. So it seems that the bug is happening only for when users start JupyterLab with some notebook already open, but open at startup, and it seems that it's more concerning for a Windows user than on other operating system. And so the bug seems very tricky to figure out. And so if somebody have high knowledge about AsyncIO and is willing to have a look and provide some guidance, that would be great, because I already reported it also at the Jupyter server, because yeah, it's tough to know where is the trouble, but yeah, that one sounds like it's gonna be tricky to solve. And finally, I just want to mention that again, at Quantstack, we are gonna propose or submit a letter of intent for a CZI grant for the maintenance and documentation of JupyterLab 4 and Notebook v7. So I'm just linking in the note the PR in which there is the letter of intent. So feel free to comment on that, and also the issue on the Jupyter governance repository asking for an approval from the steering committee. And that's all for me. Thanks.
Cool, thank you. Gabriel, you are up.
Okay. So I recently submitted a PR to add checkboxes to the file browser. And this work got me, well, it raised questions about the kernel status indicator, which is this little green dot that appears next to notebook files, as I understand it, in the file browser. So last week I was like brainstorming with Isabella on what to do about this. And in order not to hold up my PR forever, I sort of just moved, shifted margins and paddings around and column widths and arrived at something. But Isabella had raised this issue that like that status indicator doesn't apply to every file or folder in the file browser. So maybe it shouldn't have its own column, like it's sort of like dedicated column just to that kernel status indicator. So she had like an idea of like maybe overlaying it on top of the file icon. I put a screenshot of that in the HackMD. And then you can also see below that a screenshot showing how it looks with the checkboxes PR that I currently have up. So it just basically two questions for this group is like, what do people like, or like, some thoughts on these proposals. And then, if we do like Isabella's idea, I was wondering about like if we should put pause on the PR that I currently have up in order to reduce any potential like UI churn. Those are the two questions for the group.
Remind us, where is the icon currently that indicates?
It currently is left of the, it's basically the way it looks in the second screenshot that I have in
Gotcha.
HackMD, but without the checkboxes.
You
Okay.
want to just share screen so that way everyone can be on the same page?
Share which screen?
The screenshots are in the HackMD.
Yeah. So I actually had no idea that those were kernel status indicators. The little green buttons. I just thought they were like open or active files or something. So, I mean, maybe you could put like a play button there that shows like it's being played, because the semantics weren't clear to me and I use it every single day.
Yeah, when I see a dot next to a file name, I usually think that it's been modified in some way, because that's the Mac OS convention, and that if you save, that dot will disappear.
Yeah, I
think that the dot on top of the icon is less than optimal.
I should indicate too that I think that's what that is but I'm still, like new to JupyterLab. So if I got any of that wrong about what that
you are
is.
correct in what it does. That is what the indicator is for.
Okay.
But I also did not know what it was for the first 9 months I worked on this project. So you are also not crazy for not knowing that.
Just a single vote in favor of having that on top of that file icon. I like this idea.
I don't actually know, like, we were just going back and forth, like, there could be some more polish here. My thought was just, we have like a really wide space on any file that isn't a notebook, essentially, like to the left of it, so. And now with then it becomes really large with these checkboxes, so that was basically the logic, but I don't think this is like the only right solution, I just want to say.
I almost feel like that icon belongs in the tab, like at the top of the screen. Because like those are the active ones.
The browser tab or the
The
notebook?
Jupyter tab.
Jupyter tab, yeah.
So remove them from the directory listing and move them to the tabs themselves. But kernels can be up and running for files that no longer have an open tab.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Oh, wow.
Typically, it should be in a teardown process, but not guaranteed.
And kernels can be running for files as well. Kernel can be attached to any file.
Mhm.
It cannot be attached to a directory.
Mm.
So know that this the information is slightly redundant. It is maybe useful to have it in the file browser, but there's also the separate tab, right? Running terminals and kernels.
But that one doesn't say what files they're, like, it doesn't tie them back to the files, right? In the
It does
running
tie
tab?
them to the file, but it just displays the file name, and then the full path is on the mouse over hover of it. But it is probably more useful for most people to just use the file browser for most of the time, right? And so there is value to having the little dot in the file browser, but there might be an argument of how much value it offers, of course.
It is of value to myself when I have, say, 20 notebooks open, and this happens. I do not see them all, and having an extension file browser which allows me to see notebooks in separate directories, so the threefold, or I don't remember which extension, unfold. This is very handy to see which notebooks are up and running and taking space in the memory because the kernel is running.
Yeah, right. That's the running terminals and kernel thing. Of course, it doesn't have the file tree, right? So that at least definitely shows everything that is open on the server as a resource. Well, yeah, that one also could probably have a better UI, and if we can combine them more reliably in one view, maybe you could get rid of that separate thing as a tab. I don't know.
My concern with well, never mind, actually, I didn't hear all that.
Okay. Gabriel, do you have enough information to go on, or do we need to resolve a specific plan of action for you still?
I think I have some ideas I'll bounce around with, and maybe bring some of this chat to the Gitter channel or something. The one thing I don't have direction or clarity on, this is just like a newbie question, is since I do have a PR up right now, like, should I try to get that through, or should I hold off on like figuring this kernel status stuff out?
Well, I don't know what I guess the question is, are we going to release a version that has a UI thing that disappears in the next version or not? Because if not, cool, great. Like, you can have the actual branch contain an iteration upon a UI element pre-shipping. We just have to make sure that it's targeting a milestone that doesn't ship until we have consensus on what UI element does. But like, your branch just straying farther and farther is probably not great. And on net, this is a positive. So I wouldn't think you should wait forever. I think it might be better to go in once like the core functionality is ready, and we can treat this as a piece that still needs some UX iteration, but like the core functionality of your PR presumably is ready for review, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. Does anyone disagree with that?
No, I think you got it right. It's, yeah, I think the two can be done in parallel as long as we don't release one without the other or without discussing the other.
Yeah, I also follow-up question, is this behavior with the checkboxes always on, or is it flagged whether you have this checkboxes appear?
No flag currently.
All right,
Might come up in review to add it.
right, because if it was flagged, so especially if it was default off, then you could release this as is, right, even without the other thing, because it would be an opt-in for users, so it wouldn't be as disruptive. If it's always on, then those kind of smaller things become more important, right?
Right, over in the chat, we've been talking about the columns themselves. That could be data driven, and so, you know, the status quo released for a 3.3 or whatever would be the existing ones. So status, whatever it is today, file name, file modified. There would be another column available, which was checkbox or something like that, and you'd be able to set the ranks so that you could order how big they were and all that kind of stuff. So I would see, if we wanted to do that, I could see blocking the addition of the checkbox to make it configurable.
But I mean, if it is getting, it's still in the 4.0 like / master branch, so they get the bar is pretty low, right? So, and
Yeah,
it would be like really useful also, because the top comment of this pull request links to an issue in JupyterLab, and if we have it already in a 4.0 pre-release, it would make it much easier to integrate it in Notebook 7, and we could already try it there.
Yeah, so if it also has if this is very useful for JupyterLab, you could also have this as a option for the class that you don't have necessarily a configure for, but that is yeah, I don't know enough about how JupyterLab works, whether you can change the config of the different extensions.
No, I think it should eventually be configurable for sure, but it's probably not a blocker right now. But before the release, the final release, yes.
I would also say, from my understanding, what Gabriel has done is just added a UI, like visually, it's just adding the element of the checkbox and like adjusting the padding. I don't think is that drastic. Like maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't think this would be a horrible thing to jump from, because I think what it looks like right now to me is we've added something, and then if we like end up releasing it again and it's like, oh, we combined two things, I don't know if that's awful to me, but maybe I'm being too lax on those kind of UI changing backlash things. But to me, it's not like, oh, we're doing something totally new back to back. It's like we added something and then we reconsidered. So I don't see it as a blocker at all.
Okay, so is that more clarity, Gabriel? Are you good?
Yes, thank you.
Sweet. Mike, you are up next.
Yes, so I opened a PR to add scrolling in tab bar. So when there are multiple tabs in the main docking area, they can overflow. And I just wanted to ask whether anyone has any feedback on it, and because it touches on the UI, also very specifically to ask whether you think that the minimum width of the tab should be stored as a setting, as well as some parameters of the scrolling smoothness and scrolling animation speed, and how to make that happen, because I don't think that we store things which in settings which currently are could be defined as CSS. So then if we do that as a setting, user can change those things, but then themes cannot override them. And really much looking for feedback here.
I was taking a look while we've been in the meeting because I saw that ahead of us, and it's a very interesting feature. I'm on the fence about whether or not we want the scrolling because it is a type of feature that is inconsistently used in other web browsers and IDEs. I've seen some IDEs and web browsers just keep squishing the tabs until they all fit, and then others do this scrolling. And I'm not sure which one's the better experience, to the point where I'd almost say that it might be better to make this UI configurable from the offset. Make it a configurable setting, whether or not you even have it enabled. In which case, if you do have that enabled, you could toy with how to handle the minimum width as a setting for people who do enable it. I think there are ways to set minimum width, but not let them touch the CSS directly. So you don't let them set like the minimum CSS width, but you like, for instance, you could give them an enum like medium, small, wide, or something, and they choose one, and that gets set to some preset one that could still be overridden by a third-party CSS if they really want to.
I think I agree with Alex because this is Lumino and not JupyterLab, that it ought to be configurable to be a generic component you can use in lots of different kinds of applications. So I don't know what like Nick just suggested something in the chat about the placement of the buttons. And so I think there might be questions on whether you want them straddling, like bookending, or whether you want them grouped at the end. I think there might be use cases where you just want them to get small the way they currently do. I think we should probably leave a default, which is the current behavior, but and hide this, not hide this, add this behind an option. And then JupyterLab can make opinionated choices about what the default for JupyterLab is. The default for Lumino probably should be the former behavior, and this new behavior, there's an option. The default for lab can be to enable this option. Like we can make that decision on the lab front end, but not impose it on other consumers of the same components in other applications. So yeah, I echo what Alex is saying.
And to kind of expand on that, that's how the plus button works. The reason I was able to add the plus button to Jupyter so easy is somebody had already added that to Lumino. And they made it so you could you enable it, then you tie it to a signal, and then you can tinker with the CSS to like display where it is, how it behaves. And that was how I enabled it in JupyterLab. So if we add this functionality in Lumino with the same methodology, yeah, even with like where the left-right buttons go, if you make that make that in a way that you can change it via CSS, like how I was able to float the plus button to where I wanted it to be with some tinkering.
It is already implemented in the same set of design in mind that you can
Perfect.
You can tweak the settings in CSS, and you can disable that altogether in JupyterLab as well. I was just rather asking whether on the JupyterLab level we want to have those as settings which are exposed to the user, or just make opinionated choices.
I think it's worth toying with surfacing them to the user, but if it becomes, for instance, the width of a tab, if that becomes too difficult to surface to a user without, I don't know, hacking, like, then we don't. But if it's straightforward to surface to them without causing problems, it's probably worth it. But we don't want the user to have direct access to the CSS because, yeah, like you said, I think in one comment or somewhere that it could prevent third-party extensions from overwriting it, which is something we don't want to happen. So also take a good long code review at your PRs because these look really cool.
Cool, thank you. Mehmet, you're up.
Hey everyone, I just have a quick update on the desktop application. I released a new version, and this version comes with some major changes to the installation process. Now the bundled Python environment is installed on demand instead of automatically installing at during every installation. And now the Python environment is also installed into the user data directory instead of where the main application is installed. And on Mac, now we are using DMG-based installers instead of PKG. This is a much smoother drag and drop installation process. And these changes are also paving the path for automatic updates, which I will be working on soon. And also another change here is the Mac application is now code signed and notarized. There won't be any more security warnings after installation. And I use the developer certificate from NumFocus to do the code signing. So if you check the certificate, you will see NumFocus information there. Yeah, that's basically all I have.
That is awesome. The package signing and stuff, does that mean that it's on the Mac App Store, or is it still you download it from GitHub?
You still download it from GitHub. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But previously it would show you like a warning message that this app could have security issues. But now it will just say that this is downloaded from internet, but Apple checked and verified the application. Yeah, that would be a different message shown this time. But the other thing is, if you don't code sign the application, you cannot provide automatic updates. That's a like prerequisite.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Quick question about that while it's there. I can't remember if this was answered previously. Is the standalone app able to install front-end and/or back-end extensions, like third-party ones yet? Or because I want to say we were able to do front-end, but can we install like server extensions as part of that, or is it not support those as of now?
I am not 100% sure about server extensions, but you can definitely install pre-built front-end extensions.
So if the server part is part of the pre-built extension, it could theoretically work. Okay.
We have to try. I am trying.
I'll have to play with it then. I don't have any customers asking for it yet, but I think they might eventually as it becomes more prominent.
Yeah, I'll give it a try as well.
Yeah, I think a good example would be Git, since Git's like the prime server and front end example.
I see. Mike might have already tried this. He has been experimenting with extensions a lot. Mike, you are on the call.
I don't think, is Mike on the call still?
I think he left.
He left. He left. Yeah.
It does something to the when laptop it might not work because there's something happening in the files.
Nick, you are breaking up for me.
Nick just commented, I think he lost his sound.
Okay. In that case, why don't we move on to you, Alex?
Yeah, just a quick update for everybody. Since there's a bunch of us who submitted talks and tutorials to SciPy, we did hear back our tutorial is on standby. So if another tutorial is dropped due to one reason or another, we could be picked up as a tutorial for SciPy this summer. And that will be a developing extensions tutorial. So no news yet on our what's new in JupyterLab talk, which I'm taking as good news since we've now gotten a tentative tutorial. That means we at least haven't been rejected yet. So yeah, we submitted these talks and tutorials to both SciPy in July and Open Source Summit's AI and Data Science branch in June.
Cool, thanks for the update. We don't have any other agenda items. We have additional discussion continuing from where we left off last week, talking about web components. Is there anyone who wanted to do a short update before that, or should we jump into that conversation? I'll give you a few seconds if you want to say something. Okay, cool. Frederic, why don't you reacquaint us with this, please?
Yeah, sure. I started a repository with a toolkit of components that are based on custom component-based standard, but they are not used directly. So it's not vanilla JS. They are using a library that is called FAST from Microsoft. It's similar to the LIT library, LIT from Google. Why did I pick up that one and not the one from Google? It's mainly because in addition to helpers for designing the component, they have also a system for designing the design, like coloring, to enforce rules for contrast and stuff like that. So that's why I went for that one. So the idea for that, and we have opened a JAP with Eric about it, is that we believe it will help the maintenance of the projects, and also it will help potential new author to create extension. And we have already created a couple of them at Constack to test the technology. So far, it's working quite nicely. We have been doing also some trial, because one of the trouble with custom elements in the standard is that you can only define once the same new tag, and that may bring trouble in the sense that if you have two different library or the same library but two different versions trying to bind to the same name, you can have weird issues. So far, we didn't encounter that in JupyterLab, and mainly it was due to Webpack, because the library were due to federation where just one version was picked. The only thing is, like, if you don't specify like which one you want to pick, you don't control exactly which one is going to be picked. It's going to be the first one found, let's say. But I mean, if it makes it to the core, it will be controlled by us, a bit like React or CodeMirror. So that will be safe on that front. And I think the main question Darian asked last week was about is a Microsoft library droppable or not? So the answer is not droppable. So if we go that path, we are like committing to use the library. We could probably change part of the templates they are providing for creating the components, stuff like that. It's probably easy to switch to another library like LIT from Google, But then there is the other part, like the design system. That's something, yeah, it's probably possible to find an alternative, but that's probably, it's going to be more complex because there are those two parts that will need to be switched to another technology to be fair and precise.
So someone who thinks about these things is Brian, and I see him on the call. I wonder what your thoughts are. We were talking in a recent governance call about creating a group that handles design language, because that isn't like an official effort in Jupyter, and different projects do different things. But what you're describing takes us part of the way there. And yeah, I don't know. Brian, do you have any thoughts? It's also the case that his camera's off and his mic is off. He might not actually be at his screen right now. Okay, well then I retract that question and put the same question to everyone else. What do you guys think? Some of you definitely have your cameras on. I know you're there.
I think with me, my silence is I don't think I have a confident answer at this point, but I can put it on my list to look closer. I appreciate the continued updates on this though.
So one thing that I want to hear more about is, sorry, I hate that sound, and I did not mean to invade everyone's screen with that sound. This seems like it's one of the building blocks that would help make a richer extension playground as well, for you to drag and drop and compose extensions without writing JavaScript. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that. Like, does this get us any closer to the dream of an extension builder studio inside JupyterLab itself?
Depends what you expect from that builder, because at some point somebody is still to bring the intelligence in it. So that means we need to provide higher component than just checkbox and button. Probably what you will get for free is that the element will style according to JupyterLab team, but you could have that with other kind of technology too. I mean, it's the main difference maybe compared to something like React, although no, there are solutions, is like we could imagine that in the long term we'll create a higher component like a cell or something like that, and it will be really easy in your Jinja template to just say, okay, here I want a GP cell, and that's all. And you will have just a line saying I'm importing that library of component, and that will instantiate where you put the tag a cell, and that's all what you need to do. And specifying the kernel will be just setting proper attribute on that GP cell. That's definitely possible. But I mean, it could be also possible to do that in React using like MDX, probably something like that. So it's just that you are using, it's based on the standard, so it's maybe a bit better on that front than using React.
Nick Bolwag, I know you think about these things. Okay, let me read you. I like the sound of that.
hearable?
All right, let's see. Go ahead.
Okay, well, if you can hear me, that's cool. Someone stop me and watch the chat because I can barely hear anybody else.
Ooh, this is such a tease. No, we can't really hear you very well.
Like 30%.
Yeah.
So just since nobody else seemed to be fighting for the mic, this global tags that you get, that you have this global namespace of tags. How I'm less concerned about different things fighting for the same tag names as I am from different versions of things, right? But we would register this as a singleton package, right? So we would avoid that step with the singleton package declaration, which would, even for pre-built or source extension, should work out of the box, right? So we won't run into that problem directly, right?
Yeah, if it makes it to the core, then we can ensure that there is only one version, as we are doing for React, for example.
Right. So how extensible would it be, or how would you extend it if people want to say like, hey, I desperately want the progress bar to look different for some weird reason?
That's a good question. There are ways of doing it. But basically, it probably means like you will need to go to having your own webpack and say, okay, I'm replacing, using an alias, saying I'm replacing the standard one by my version. But that should be fine.
Right, so you would replace the entire extension with your own implementation of the extension. You would disable the core extension and use your own extension instead.
Yeah, I think that's the best.
Okay. I don't feel like we are arriving at something approaching consensus on this, but it also feels like lots of people haven't spent that much time thinking about the issue. So I don't think there's disagreement either. I just think there aren't that many well-formed opinions right now. What would you like to gain out of this conversation? Is there some sort of decision that will help you move forward? Is there some sort of feedback, some commitment for people to review? Like, what would you like from this discussion?
The main point is, do we think it's the right path forward so that we move, or I move slowly by proposing PR of replacing core components by component from that library? That's basically the path I hope to take.
Okay, so I think that this should be one of the first questions we put to the JupyterLab Council. Because this is a serious decision, we don't appear to be approaching consensus, but I also don't think we have enough people in the JupyterLab Council yet for that vote to feel particularly binding. So what I might propose is we bring this up again in another couple discussions, we get more people involved and try to get either a sort of consensus within one of these conversations where everyone's like, cool, let's do it, or somebody presents a slam dunk case for why we don't. And barring that, we use the governance mechanisms and we put it to a vote, except we need a larger council. I think our current council is like, so I don't know, there's a draft PR in the Team Compass. I don't remember what the last count is, but whatever it is, it's not enough, right? So we grow that a bit. And if we have, by the time we've grown that enough that we feel like it's representative, if we don't have consensus, then we vote on it. But right now, I'm not really seeing how to resolve your question, which is a totally reasonable one, but not enough of us appear to have an opinion.
In parallel to that, Frederic, is this something that you were hoping to get into 4.0? Because if this is a post 4.0 pitch, I feel like taking that time that Darian was talking about is good. Wait for the governance, wait for, because I'm on the fence about this. Like, I don't have a strong enough opinion to decide how I feel about it yet. And so if this isn't something that we're like really pushing for 4.0, I'd say if you're at a point where it's ready to go or not to go, to table it until we can make that decision and aim for it for 5 or 4.x if it's not back. I'm assuming it's going to be an API breaking, just with how everything's going to change, even if it looks the same.
Yeah, actually, it's not going to be an API breaking change. Because basically, is instead of saying I'm taking a stock button or a button from some React library, I will use the button from that component. So basically, the interface, the look of it can change a bit, but everything that is about the API and what you are doing with the component will be the same. Because I'm definitely not speaking about replacing the component that, like, I'm creating a cell component here. I just want to go small step, like, so that means using a basic interactor like combo box, buttons. And as we discussed last week, the primary target will certainly be the settings editor. So yeah, except look and feel, I shouldn't change anything in terms of API.
Okay, so that's really good. That means
that actually helps me a lot.
Yeah, so there's no immediate pressure to like arrive at a quick decision. On the other hand, you don't want a bunch of work you've done to sit around forever either. So it's just more that we now understand the sort of deadline type constraints are less pressing. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe, oh, Martha's on the call. Maybe you can talk a bit with Martha about how this would work in the setting editor. I think maybe tagging Isabella and Brian to talk about design language, like basically have a few sort of smaller group conversations about this to see what the shape of moving in this direction would actually look like and whether we have enough buy-in to do it. And let's revisit this in the next few calls, I would say.
One question that I think could be useful is the API that would be exposed to users. So not their API again, you said that's stable, that's good. But if somebody wanted to start using these components, how much churn or how final do you think those APIs are? How stable do you think they are if we wanted to make changes? Like, for example, I don't know now if there is a way to express kind of how dense you want the thing to be. Like you're saying, like, I want a small text box, or I want a large one, or I want a mobile, so I want all my components to be dense or high density. So I don't, that's probably not there immediately, but if somebody wanted to add feature like that, like how much would the APIs change, or would they be stable? And that could be something you added behind the scenes. So if you believe that the APIs are stable, it's a lot less problematic to go early, right? So those kind of questions can be, if things are stable, that's a good argument for to ensure people are comfortable with this change.
Okay, as promised, I want to leave a minute or two in case someone wants to make an announcement that we shouldn't put on the recording. And it seems like we have plenty to discuss about this going forward. So if it's okay with you guys, I'm going to stop the recording